Well, for us 90s kids, Scary Spice just took on a whole new meaning. Hey, what's going on everybody, and welcome back to Baker Reviews. Today, we got a big one.
My mother's coming.
That's what she said. No.
Alright, so if you're a longtime subscriber, if you saw my Dune 2021 review from a few years ago, you will know that Dune 2 is absolutely one of my most anticipated movies of 2023. But as we all know now, obviously it got pushed back to Q1 of this year, and while it was frustrating at the time, I gotta say, in hindsight, kinda happy the way things worked out, because for us movie fans, 2024 so far has been
The world.
Now, the first movie in this series, back in 2021, not the David Lynch version, the first movie in the Denis Villeneuve series, that was a movie that I actually didn't go see right away in theaters because I wasn't familiar with the Frank Herbert novelization, but I eventually saw Dune. Unfortunately, I did not get to experience it in theaters.
Man, you are one pathetic loser.
And that first movie did have a huge responsibility of trying to bring in a whole group of people, including many like myself, who have never read the novels, who don't really understand this world. You know, so that first movie had to lay the foundation, had to do all the proper world building, had to introduce us to the key players in this universe. Whereas this follow-up here, Dune Part 2, kind of just gets to build on top of that and just focus more on pushing this story forward. And after watching these movies, especially the second one, you really start to notice where people like George Lucas with Star Wars, George R.R. Martin with Game of Thrones even, you see where all these like science fiction, high fantasy writers, you see where they all kind of took some inspiration from Frank Herbert's original novelization all the way back in 1965. Like, there were so many moments when I was watching this movie where I'm like, that is 100% Star Wars. And then I had to remember, like, Frank Herbert wrote this book 12 years before Star Wars was even a thing, was even a thought. And I was actually thinking about this is kind of funny, but our protagonist here, Paul Atreides, definitely shares some similarities with one Anakin Skywalker. First of all, they both have just this enormous pressure put on them from a very young age to be like the chosen one to save a group of people. And then secondly, of course, you have like these nightmares or these premonitions of things, of future events that he wants to avoid. Although Anakin would not like Arrakis. That's a lot of sand.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere.
And I've kind of been trying to rack my mind, trying to figure out how I want to do this review, because I'm just really excited to talk about this movie, if you can't tell. But this isn't going to be like a full story breakdown, it's not going to go beat for beat. I'm also keeping this spoiler free, but if there's something I absolutely have to talk about, I'll either cut it in post or I'll leave like a little timestamp on the screen so you can skip that. So if you haven't seen the movie, this is a safe space. And if something gets through the cracks, like I said, I'll leave a timestamp. But what I do need to talk about is just the first act a little bit, because this movie essentially picks up where the first one left off. We just had Paul that killed Jameis. He's kind of in with the Fremen people right now, still trying to make his way. The movie does start with a little snippet, a little cutaway of a new character played by Florence Pugh. But right after that, right when we get back to Paul, it's him and the Fremen people traveling through the desert after his battle with Jameis. And very early on, you see that the Fremen people trying to teach Paul how to be one of them. They're trying to teach him how to properly sandwalk. They're trying to teach him how to ride worms.
That's what she said. Hey!
And one of the biggest conflicts in this movie starts in this first act, and it is an internal conflict. Paul is kind of torn in two about whether he should be trying to embrace this Lisan al-Gaib, kind of like a god role, like one that'll bring them to nirvana, if he should be like playing into that, or if he should just kind of play it more low-key and walk alongside the Fremen people instead of trying to be like this great leader. I saw a term that Sean Chandler used. By the way, if you're not subscribed to Sean Chandler, he's fantastic. He used the phrase grown-up sci-fi. First of all, I really like that phrasing. And second of all, I would take that a step further and just say that this movie, both of these movies have been grown-up storytelling. Like, there is a lot happening in this world. There's political positioning, there's puppet strings being pulled behind closed doors, you know, there's backstabbing, there's manipulation, there's corrupt figures, there's religious differences. This is a lot to take in. I love how the movie doesn't try to hold your hand. It doesn't try to dumb itself down for the lowest common denominator. It doesn't force in dumb jokes and otherwise serious moments. And you all know exactly who I'm talking about. You know, this is just all good stuff. This is world building. It's so much more complex than he good, he bad. Like, everybody has their own personal agendas. Like, even if they fall under a group, a certain religion or a certain group, everybody still kind of has their own hidden agendas as to why they do the things they do. And what this is a director in Denis Villeneuve and an entire team that loves the source material. Like, they had an entire team study how sand moves so it felt more realistic. Like, that's the level of research they did here. And it shows through on the screen how much they love this universe. They weren't worried about putting stuff in to make more money or inserting stupid, out-of-place jokes.
I hereby open this holy council.
This is just a group of people that love the source material, and they want to focus on making the best possible version of that story. And God, this is what Hollywood just needs so much more of. And on that point, visually, this is maybe the best visual effects I've ever seen put to a screen. And I'm not being extreme, I'm not being hyperbolic. I 100% mean that. This movie is flawless to look at. Like, to the point where, you know, obviously they're using a ton of CGI, but it doesn't even feel like CGI. This is like every bit as impressive as the Avatar movies, visually, except, you know, it's actually good. I'm sorry, Avatar fans. But yeah, all the different areas we go to, different worlds, all have like their different color palettes and schemes. You even have this one area that it's always black and white outside. They could have just done that as a cool visual cue, but they even had an in-universe reason for this place being black and white. Like, that's the attention to detail, well, first of all, that Frank Herbert had, but also Denis Villeneuve. And going right along with the visuals, hand in hand, is the sound design and the sound mixing. This movie is fucking loud as hell. Like, if you go to like an IMAX theater, you go to one with like the shaking seats, you feel like you're like going off the edge of a cliff. You feel like you're experiencing every moment with these characters. Hans Zimmer fucking crushes it again with his score because that dude is a master of the craft. The sound design mixed with the visual aesthetic, it's enough to make you cry even if the story was shit, and it's not. But films like this are a prime example of why we cannot let movie theaters die. This is a movie that 100% needs to be seen in theaters. It demands theater attention. Like, it's not a movie you watch on your smartphone on HBO Max in 6 months from now. It's just not gonna have that same visual, audio, it's just not gonna have that same impact overall. This is why theaters need to stay open. This movie cost $190 million to make. And look, I'm not crazy. I know that is a shit ton of money. A lot of normal casual movie fans are probably like, well yeah, it should look good for that much money. But for context, let me share a few movies from last year that had a bigger budget and clearly didn't put it into the movie because we'll talk about it. Consider The Flash. Yes, the Ezra Miller Flash movie from last year. That film cost, I can't call that a film. That movie cost $210 million to make, or $20 million more than Dune 2. And do we remember how bad that movie looked? Do we really have to talk about Microwave Baby again?
What the hell is even that?
And then example number 2, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. That movie cost fucking $300 million to make.
What did you say? What the fuck did you just say?
$300 million went into that movie. And then you watch that movie compared to this one and you're like, where the fuck did all that money go? But once you get past the amazing visuals and the epic score from Hans Zimmer, what you're left with is this story about this reluctant leader, Paul Atreides, and this movie is just a fascinating kind of examination and commentary on faith, religion, and false prophets. Because you do have two very different mindsets within the Fremen people. You have this group over here that we're going to refer to as the religious nuts. No offense. But these are the people that are their faith is unwavering. They're gonna follow Paul to hell and back. Anything he does, anything he says goes, because they 1000% believe this is their healer, this is their leader, this is the one that'll take them to paradise. This is their lisan al-gaib. And then you have this group over here who are kind of more of the skeptics. They're more of the doubters. My people. But they are more of the people that they kind of laugh at the idea of this outsider coming to lead their people to salvation. A lot of them believe that, this prophecy has just been made up by religious leaders to give them false hope, to keep them fighting. But the movie does force yourself to ask these serious, sometimes uncomfortable questions. Even in our real world, how much throughout history has religion been used and manipulated to, manipulate the masses, to have control of a group of people? Because if you go through the world history and look through all the wars, you'll be shocked to see how many of them were started because of religious differences or religious reasons.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
So I do find the themes of the movie fascinating, of religion, faith, blindly following maybe an overly charismatic leader, and the historic dangers of that. As expected, Zendaya's character Chani plays a much bigger role this time around. She's not just like in premonitions of the future. A large chunk of the screen time is actually dedicated to her being kind of the hardest on Paul, but it's because she cares, forming this relationship with him, but also keeping him at arm's length because she can see the power within him and it kind of scares the shit out of her. But you do see her like starting to believe, even if he isn't the lisan al-gaib, he is a genuinely good person who wants to help the Fremen people. And to her, that's a much bigger deal. And man, I have to say, some of her best acting moments in the entire movie, man, it's all with the eyes. It is all with the eyes. She's just so good at expressing everything she wants to say without having to say a word. And then, of course, our other lead, Timothée Chalamet, yet another fantastic performance. This kid is special. Like, as long as he wants to be a tour de force in Hollywood, he's gonna have jobs galore. This kid probably gets like 25 scripts a day to his front door, and he's just gonna keep getting better and better. And I do enjoy his performance even more here than I did in the first movie. The first movie, Paul was kind of more of this young, naive kid. This time around, he has a lot more responsibility. He's got like the weight of the world on his shoulders. He has this group of people who worship him and the pressures that go with that. He has his fair share of critics and doubters. He's constantly asked to make impossible decisions. And he's even lost like his safety blanket from the first movie of not having his father or Duncan around every time he makes a mistake. And what I really liked about the character this time around is it's a lot more of that mix of light and dark. Paul kind of spends this movie in a gray area. They start him out with the traditional hero's journey, but Paul isn't what you would call a hero. Now, out of the new cast of characters, to me, and to a lot of other people, Austin Butler was easily the standout here as Feyd-Rautha. This dude was an absolute menacing psychopath in this movie, but he also had like this twisted sense of honor, which to me is always inherently more compelling for a villain. I was loving every second he was on screen. And he even gets most of the badass fight sequences in this movie. Which, side note, who would have thought the best fight in 2024 so far would be Elvis versus Wonka? What a time to be alive. This movie just continues to do a fantastic job of like further expanding the lore and the mythology of the Dune universe and further investing us in things like the Atreides bloodline, the Harkonnen, the Sardaukar, the Bene Gesserit, and just this entire Dune universe. I think both of these movies have done a fantastic job of giving us moments of like large exposition or lore dumps, but never quite feeling overwhelming. And then I will say there is one pretty big reveal in the third act of this movie, but this is a spoiler-free review, so we're not going to talk about that. But there is one pretty big twist here. But do yourselves a favor, if you're watching this review before you go see the movie, don't spend the entire movie trying to guess the twist. Like, why would you do that to yourself? Just enjoy the film. And then the only things I would say in the way of mixed or negative, like I wanted this movie to be even longer. I want a 4-hour version of Dune Part 2. Even as great as they did, I still feel like there's more characters. I want some more backstory. I want to learn more about Feyd-Rautha, and I want to learn more about the Harkonnen family. And obviously, it's understandable. There's only so many things you can show with the runtime. But man, I just wanted more of these characters, more of this universe. And my only outright negative, which is such a weird kind of nitpicky thing, I don't know if I'm the only one, but Christopher Walken is the first actor in both of these movies where I'm like, this dude is out of place here.
Hey! You're talking to my guy all wrong. It's the wrong tone. Do it again, I'll stab you in the face with a soldering iron.
Alright guys, but that's gonna do it for this review. If you couldn't tell, this is absolutely 100% my early movie of the year in 2024. I consider this to be a genuine sci-fi masterpiece, better than the first Dune, which I already loved, and it is gonna take a mighty effort for another movie to top this one this year for me. I'm gonna give Dune Part 2 a 9.25 out of 10, and this is a must-see theater movie. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, hurry up before it's too late. As always, let me know down in the comments, what did you think of this movie? Did it live up to the hype? Did it surpass the first Dune movie for you from 2021? Or are both of these movies kind of disappointments to you? I would be very fascinated to hear that side of the argument, and I would assume I'd get it more from like the fans of the books, because I don't know how much the story has been changed here. As always, me and two friends do a weekly pop culture podcast called Culture Shock. That's available wherever you get your podcasts, but I will also have a link in the description. And yes, we will be doing an episode on this very soon. But as always, if you enjoyed this review and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe right here so you don't miss any of my future content, or check out my backlog. Be sure to like the video, leave a comment, let me know what you thought. And as always,